This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. You may have noted that in the last few months, the sponsor of the show is Kymira Sport. So in this episode, I thought it would be helpful to dig deeper and find out more about their incredible technology and relate this to mental toughness. So the creator and founders of Kymira Sport and Golf in the UK, Tim Brownston and Michael Davis, join me today. Both have a passion for excellence in sport. Both are former athletes themselves. We go on to discuss focus, how you can go on to make your own look, the importance of recovery, as well as the Kymira brand, and how the sportswear can help you in your life and in your sport. So would you like to tell the listeners a bit about the backstory behind Kymira Sport and Kymira Golf?
Absolutely. So Kymira came out of frustrations, really, as a lot of companies do. So I was a student at university, and I'd actually been working with the technology that's in Kymira products, but for completely different reasons. I was looking into wound dressings. So my interest was helping large surface area burn victims heal quicker. And to get a medical device to market requires many millions of pounds worth of clinical research. And that was money I certainly didn't have. There was a PhD offer on the table, but I was concerned that it was going to get stuck in the lab. And so I ended up coming up with at the time, a bit of a crazy idea, which was maybe I could use the sporting market, which doesn't have as large a regulatory requirements, to bring forward that point of commercialization. And then we can reinvest the money we make into getting to the medical market eventually. And that's exactly what we've done. So we have, you mentioned Kymira Sport and Kymira Golf. We then have a sister brand as well, which is Kymira Medical, which is using the same technology, but applying it into sort of chronic care for a number of different condition types.
That makes sense. And you talk about the clinical research side of things. How does that work?
So it's quite varied, really. So we define between clinical, which is independent, and it's third party. So Kymira is not involved other than perhaps providing product to do the research with. Then we have a large body of anecdotal case study evidence, which is large population sizes. So, for example, an international rugby team who've been using the kit for 3 years, that's been around about 48, 50 people continuously for that period of time, but it's not done under lab conditions. And then we have evidence that's coming back from reviews from our sort of e-commerce customers that they may not be professional athletes, but their opinion is just as important, and you can see trends far better from a high volume of those consumer customers, which then may inform some of our clinical research that's done. I say it's done independently typically by universities of different degrees.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That does. And in terms of the brand and increasing the brand awareness there, I'm guessing you'll have come across some challenges along the way.
Yeah, well, I'd say that one of the biggest challenges with regards to sort of increasing that awareness was learning to communicate everything that goes into a Kymira product effectively for all people. And if you go and look up sort of the advised level of scientific communication from the government, for example, they say a high GCSE level, and which means that a large amount of the processes that a Kymira garment might bring about aren't really readily communicable. So we landed on a strategy for us, which was we will use a long, complicated word like cyclic guanosine monophosphate, but we will then explain what that is and what it does, what it means for you, so that you can relate to it. And so learning about Kymira may end up being quite a niche one, but an education, because people may learn areas that otherwise they're not being exposed to. But there just wasn't a way to bridge the gap between here's a list of bullet points that we're not going to explain to you how it happens, and actually going in. When I first launched the company, our About Us page was basically a literature review. and it alienated more people than benefited from it.
Yeah, because I suppose when you're buying a product, really you want to know how it's going to help you and benefit you.
Yeah, absolutely. And largely speaking, all of those areas that are coming from sort of the clinical evidence and stuff, those are all features and functions of the garment. But as any good marketer will tell you, you want to promote a benefit. And so the benefit is giving the credibility and the science for those that want it. But the benefit is actually just that you hurt less, or that you've got an increased range of movement because your muscle suppleness has been improved, and allowing the customer all of the resource that they want. So right now, if someone goes on that journey, they can start from reading the benefits. They can go into the science page and sort of see that sort of middle ground. And it is still fully referenced. So if they want to go and read all the references that we're making, citations to either the independent studies on Kymira products or supporting evidence, it's there for them to do so. And that's very important to us because we are science first in what we do. And our goal as a company is to make a difference with our technology. And we can't do that without appreciating sort of the science that's gone into it.
Without doubt. And obviously the podcast title is Demystifying Mental Toughness here. So one of the elements of mental toughness is commitment. And I would say that a good 99% of people that I work with, support, are highly motivated, driven, and committed. However, they're not necessarily the most efficient in the way they go about things. So whereabouts, where can Kymira help them in that respect?
Well, from an efficiency standpoint, ultimately, the really key thing here is that they can benefit from using our products without changing a thing. So they're going to get dressed every day. If they wear a jumper, then they can wear one of our jumpers. So the hoodie I'm wearing right now is infused with our infrared technology. And it's a lot of people think that the adoption of things that can help means that they have to change, drastically change their life. And in some cases they need to. But for those, like you've just described there, when they're already pretty highly motivated and they're looking for optimization, it's far easier to optimize someone by asking them to not really make a big change and just benefit passively in the background. But I also wanted just to also sort of say, when you talk about mental toughness, one could argue it's the wrong type of mental toughness, but sometimes some of the barriers we come up to, especially within sort of elite, high intensity sporting realms, and certain sports more than others. But for example, we deliver a pain relief aspect, and some athletes will come back and say, but the pain tells me that I'm working hard. I don't want to lose that because I'm proud of, it is a badge of honor for me, and I don't want to be stripped of that. And, so we had a campaign a few years ago, which was sort of something along the lines of all gains, no pain. And because it's true, but for some athletes, that's a positive reinforcer for them. And so the sort of, I guess that's more macho-ness than toughness necessarily. But when you ask the question, it does sort of bring to mind some of those conversations I've had in the past of saying, well, why do you need to hurt for this to know you're improving? Are the numbers not enough positive reinforcement for you? Is the improvement in your time or the amount of weight you're lifting? Is that not ultimately the measure that you want to be judging yourself against?
Yeah, I suppose the sports you're talking there about are the endurance sports or combat sports.
We've had a whole variety. I would say less so within sort of the golfing side of the business, but we've had weightlifters come back with that sort of comment. We've had your CrossFitters. We've had endurance athletes, as you say, sprinters. The fight athletes actually have often been those that have just sort of jumped on it and gone, yeah, I could do with not hurting quite as much, so I'll take what I can get. In the golfing market, I think it's more of a lack of awareness, and I'd welcome to comment here because for a lot of what the customers that I engage to, it's the case of if you stop and ask them around, for example, they'll think, and actually, yeah, I am quite stiff, but I don't think that it's really being spoken of. It's a demographical thing or what it is that's causing that lack of thought in the area. But as I say, you've come across some quite interesting statistics, which we've discussed in the past, that don't necessarily tell the whole story as it is.
Yeah, I think when we were looking at my background's obviously in tennis, and it's also a non-contact sport. And when you looked, I across my whole life, I've been going to tournaments, and you saw the amount of people that were injured and playing in pain. And yes, they were there, but it wasn't an enormous amount. And then I kind of lost my passion for tennis and kind of discovered it for golf, and joined a golf club. And just sitting down in at the golf club at the end of a round was just. It was incredible to see the complaints about everyone had an injury somewhere, whether it was their knee, whether it was their lower back, Achilles. And the effects that having these niggles can actually have on your mental toughness is enormous. I mean, I think it also comes down to one of the biggest things in mental toughness for me when I was playing tennis was preparation. Was if you were best prepared to go out and put out your best effort, you knew that mentally. So there was no distractions. You knew you put yourself in the best possible position to win. And that gave you confidence when you're out there on the court, on the pitch, on the track. And that's something that I've always thought that Kymira can offer elite athletes and amateur athletes, and the peace of mind in knowing that they've done everything they can using this particular garment or other emerging technologies, whether that's to do with their diet, to get the best possible performance out of themselves.
That's actually another factor in mental toughness, is really trying to be the best version of yourself, the best that you can be. And yeah,
absolutely. I think one of the best ways of doing it, a new way that's coming out of is emerging technologies. If you want to find that extra 1-2%, technology is moving at such a rate now, and all these emerging technologies you can use to improve your performance that maybe have not yet been regulated, they're out there now. And they're coming in quick and fast, and we're one of them. And we know that we're providing competitive advantages to athletes, whether that be it's something that's more easily tied to performance, like with endurance athletes, or whether it's to do with golfers out there, which is very difficult to say. You wear our Kymira golf kit, you're going to go out there and you're going to shoot a lower score. But you're going to be in a better mind frame, your body's going to be in a better position, and it's going to give you that extra 1-2% that may not be noticeable to you, but it will be on the scorecard.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I really do, because let's face it, if you've got a niggle or you've had an injury, the likelihood is it's going to impact on your commitment level in training. So it might be that for a period you're operating at 70, 80%. And then likewise, that trust factor, trusting your ability in tournament play, it's not going to be there. So yeah, you're ultimately giving people an advantage to improve their focus levels when they are training.
Absolutely. We've had some, it was only a very small trial, but focus is an interesting one for us, because we had a small trial that was done at North Carolina State University, and they actually found that when wearing Kymira tops, there was an increase in beta wave activity, looking into using EEGs to measure sort of brain function. And so it sparked an interest with us with regards to, okay, so beta waves are associated with focus and calmness, and what's causing that. And we know full well that it's not from penetrating the skull, because the emissions from our garments, the skull would absorb them. So actually that's coming from chemical reactions that are being carried up in the blood to the brain. And it's an area that at some point in the future, I would love to get back to sort of doing some more research on, because it's absolutely fascinating.
Sounds right up my street. That does.
Absolutely.
Do you want to share a little bit more about that?
Well, I'd say unfortunately it was a provisional trial that one of our customers just sort of said, I'm doing my masters, and would you be willing for me to sort of use some of my own kit? And we said, not just that, we'll send you a couple of extra ones so we can see some more. And their application for it actually was more focused in esports. So the thing that we were talking about was whether or not I refer to it as the tipping point. I think it's referred to something else within that industry. But the point at which someone who thrives under pressure starts to lose efficiency because they just become overwhelmed, and we were looking into a number of different interventions, but could the infrared exposure and those chemical reactions give enough of a measurable difference in that tipping point to make it worthwhile within that application? And of course, as Mike was saying, when you look at it, and it's not just, there's brain function and we had measurable difference there, but it's the system as a whole. If you're sat there and your temperature range is more comfortable, you don't have sore shoulders in the case of someone who's sat at a desk computing. A number of different things just mean that there's less distractions for the brain to process and accommodate, and therefore more brain space, B, just more simply put, more energy can be brought to bear at the task that you're doing versus being spent on homeostasis, for example.
Yeah, because, well, let's face it, I suppose it doesn't really matter what sport you're playing, but certainly in that warm up or the hour before you go to compete, when the nerves kick in and the butterflies, it certainly can be the time for overthinking things.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, for me, sadly, I'm not anymore, but like Mike, he had a sporting career, and the times that are best, which I would say translate into sort of the same business things, I can recite absolutely perfect recall of what within my tunnel vision occurred, but everything external to me is just taken out of that recollection. And so I could not tell you what the crowd were like, what the weather was like, if a bird were flying over, but I can tell you if a bird came into that tunnel for me, then I could tell you about it. And actually, one of the sports that helped me most, which was sort of a secondary sport to some of the main ones I did, was I did some time with the British Modern Pentathlon and the pistol shooting teams, and the necessity of the sort of A, psychology, but B, being able to regulate that focus standpoint. That was some of the most powerful I've ever had. Simply put, in that sport, if you're shooting over a 10-meter distance, a slight tremor that's come because I've lost focus and I've had a slight adrenaline spike could mean that 1/4 millimeter on the barrel of the guns ended up being, a full centimeter or so by the time it's traveled down range. And that was, I've tried to take that into not just the sports I did subsequently, but, into my day-to-day activities now with Kymira and the business, and always being aware of our technology has its limits. It can do certain things, but thinking creatively around, well, actually, if we can alleviate X, then that might have an unrelated response that you would, in terms of what you might expect, but it can still deliver a measurable difference because you're taking away from a distraction, you're taking away from a limiting factor by enabling it with, the application of the technology elsewhere.
And a lot of that links to athletes' core beliefs ultimately. And
core beliefs is an area which I'm pleased with because of how we handle things. But for example, if Mike and I are speaking to an athlete, or we're speaking to coaches or their doctors or their physiotherapists, for example, we would be looking to, typically speaking, in that if it's we're pitching for a sale, we'll be speaking about travel, recovery, training. Very rarely are we going to go off the bat straight after use in competition, because as ex-athletes, we know if someone forces us to do something different in competition that we've, different to our routine, that could have a bigger psychological impact than the physiological benefits that our products can deliver. We're also safe in the knowledge that every time we do that, eventually the question comes back, so-and-so likes to wear a base layer in the game. Is it okay for them to use yours? And of course, the answer is always yes. But, it's just the way that we prefer to do things. It's not all about the sale. It's about doing right by the athletes we're working with. And in this instance, forcing a change in an area that's so critical just isn't going to be, conducive to achieving what both of us want.
Yeah, I can imagine as well. A lot of athletes are quite superstitious. So if, for argument's sake, they were to wear your product once and they win or have a good performance, then they'll probably not wash it.
Well, we have had reviews of X has gone so well, I haven't taken it off. I need to get a second pair of socks or whatever because I need to wash it after 2 weeks or something.
Yeah, it's funny the rituals an athlete has.
Well, and I was. If you look into any of my psychometrics, I will come out that I don't believe in luck. Luck is being in a position to take advantage of an opportunity, etc. But when my first international sport was sprinting, I had the same chain that I wore every single time that I would compete. I had my ritual of things that I would go through, and so one side of me was saying no, luck doesn't exist, and yet I was just as vulnerable to sort of my rituals and my processes just in case.
Yeah, I've just been writing an article actually this morning around that topic. How often people just think they're confident or they're not, but actually there's sources of confidence which you can feed off.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when I was digging that a little bit further, Serena Williams, Michael Jordan, they both had superstitions and rituals.
Yep.
So yeah, everybody. I don't think anybody's immune to that.
Absolutely.
I think they're worthwhile. As an athlete, I always remember they provided me with a protection of where that this is, I do this so that this isn't going to happen, and then I have confidence knowing it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen. I could convince myself that was the case.
Well, and interestingly, on that point, some of Kymira's first ever customers were were a number of British rowers, and a lot of, I don't know if it's still the case now, but back then, a lot of the women's rowing squad were biochemists, physicists, etc. And so the reason that we sort of got them partly was because I was rowing at a university at the time, and partly because it was a scientific curiosity for them that they wanted to test. But we were doing some video testimonials once, and one of them said something very interesting, which was basically that Kymira delivered measurable differences to her, and she could see that in her numbers. It started there before any physiological adaptation could occur, and then it accelerated her improvements. But that then gave her an added almost placebo, because she trusted in the kit. That meant that she had more confidence that in a heat-based setting, where she might have 5 races a day, she could go 100% in every single race. And she had confidence that she would recover back to her baseline in between, which then gave her the extra mental boost. And it was really interesting seeing how she'd broken it down as a scientist, sort of saying, I have my data that says this works, but then I also have my head and my heart telling me that I get an added benefit on top of the physiological, which, the sum of the parts is greater than than they are on their own.
Yeah, that's such a big thing. That feeling, I suppose. Whether you're training or whether you're competing, the ability to switch from thinking too much about things to actually just using feel is so important. And yeah, if the products give that through training, through practice, and through wearing them on a regular basis, then fantastic.
Yep.
There's one other thing which we haven't touched on there is in golf. Obviously, you can play golf until you're about into your 80s quite easily. However, once you start getting to my age in your 40s, then you start picking up niggle after niggle.
30s.
30s, all right. Very well, yeah, actually. It was 30s for me thinking about it. And yeah, thinking about this whole feeling good on the golf course, surely by wearing products like Kymira, you're going to be in a position to feel better at an older age, and it might even mean that you play the game for longer.
Well, that's actually something we're running on a study on at the moment. Is that it's hard to monitor and say that if you wear the kit, you're going to go out and you're going to play a better round of golf. But we want to prove that. We want to show that. And where we found in some of the older age groups is towards the 16th, 17th, and 18th hole, the exhaustion's setting in. Their muscles are not feeling like they were on the first and second hole. Their scores tend to go a little bit low. You start to see a few more bogeys coming in, double bogeys coming in on those holes. So what we've started doing is we have a team of ambassadors that are wearing our kit regularly now. And we're asking them to compare their last 5 scorecards when they've been using Kymira in the last 3 holes compared to when they weren't using it. So we're collecting that data at the moment, but so far, that's what's been noticeable, and it's noticeable to the people that have bought the products. And that's what we're trying to get that first product into people's hands, let them feel the benefits, and then they can come back and experiment more with other problem areas. Because let's face it, it's not always just your lower back that's hurting after a round of golf. It's your knee, it's your shoulders, it's your ankles. So it help quite a lot.
And not just that, but the origin of why Kymira Golf exists. Michael's business partner Diana and I met and got talking, and she's in her 80s and had all but given up playing. And through conversation with me, sort of, it started off with I want a pair of socks, and turned into actually, this sounds pretty good, I'll give it a go. And within a few weeks, she was out playing several rounds a week. And that's, there are many stories like Diana, particularly within the golfing community, where we've enabled people to get back to doing what they love. And, for me, that's where I come to work every day.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and that stems across the county players as well that started seeing decreasing in their their handicap was going up, and they're starting to see it go back down, and it's because they're feeling better on the final few holes. But not just that, if they are playing a couple times a week, they're better recovered after the previous session that they've had.
I like the fact that you mentioned there, Tim, about basically putting smiles on people's faces too. Yeah. That's what I see in my job as well. It is all about that and enjoying the experience rather than throwing your toys out the pram.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's it.
So, we're moving towards the end of the podcast episode there now. I'll start with you, Michael. Who would you say has been the biggest influence on your career, and why?
The biggest influence, I'd have to say, and I couldn't not say it, has to be my dad, because even through my tennis career, from taking me to tournaments and helping me deal with temper tantrums, supporting me through going out to Florida, and then my collegiate career, everything, he's always kind of been there, my support system. And it was the word influence that got me there. I was hoping to say someone like Dwayne Johnson has influenced me the most, but influence was the word that kind of stuck out and stuck with my dad, because throughout the course of my growing up and then my development of my career as well, he's always been the person there that's kind of molded me and kept me on the right line.
That's nice. And how about you, Tim?
So I think I struggle, and I would love to just give credit to Dad, but I think whether it's a cop-out answer or not, but it's those around me, and that's team, that's family, that's colleagues like Mike, that's working with the team that are in the office upstairs, and especially this year, just it's unavoidable to not bring it up, but we've all been suffering mentally due to different effects of the pandemic, and it's knowing that that there's a team of people that are A, sharing the experience, but B, have your back when you need them. But also for me, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a bit of a savior complex or something to that description. And it's a motivator for me to say, well, I want to do better by those that that I'm working with, and they help me, as well as my own goals for what I want Kymira to do in a wider sense. I want to do right by the people that are in front of me here, and I want to become a better manager. I want to help make sure that they've got long-term job security, that they can progress and we can support their career. And so when thinking and reflecting on this, I really couldn't come back to a better answer than it's not identifying a single individual, but it's those around me that sort of help me and inspire me every day to keep doing what we do.
That's nice. You better make sure they tune into this episode afterwards, since you've paid them a nice handy compliment.
Absolutely.
And if we look at 2 key takeaways from this episode, Tim, do you want to give one, and then Michael, you give one afterwards?
Sure. So I'd say that as we've spoken about throughout, that things aren't always a simple one thing changes and another thing gets fixed. So to look holistically. And as Mike said, I think about halfway through, the point we're at with a lot of technologies is that the limiting factors beforehand, i.e. it requires a lifestyle change, it's clunky, it's bulky, whatever it might be, whether it's using Kymira products or whether it's using other technologies out there on the market that do different things, we can achieve these without really much disruption to our lives now. And I think the big thing that needs to grow is just the awareness that's capable, whether it's electronics, whether it's passive like our products. We can do these things and we can be enabled to be better without really having to disrupt our lives, without having to shell out, thousands of pounds to do it, or euros or dollars, or, wherever you are listening to this episode. So as for me, I'd say that sort of think outside the box and increase your awareness in terms of what's out there, because for a lot of people, I think they'll be surprised in terms of what sort of technological enablement is possible these days.
Yeah, it's certainly changed, hasn't it, massively over the last 10, 15 years or so.
Absolutely. Especially, well, even last 5 years has been probably the steepest ramp up that we've seen.
Yeah, I like that. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. How about you, Michael?
Well, my answer actually kind of ties into Tim's as well, and it's just preparation. And as an athlete, give yourself the best possible chance to win. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. It could be 6 months prior to any sort of tournament. It's reevaluating your diet. It's trying, as Tim alluded to, emerging technologies. Do everything you can to give yourself the extra advantage, the 1% that quickly add up through changing different things in your lifestyle into 5%. And you look at the most elite athletes in the world, the sacrifices that they made. And a great example, Novak Djokovic, one of the first tennis players to go vegan. He made that change, and everyone was really kind of on the fence. There wasn't the data there to suggest that he was going to become a better tennis player for a plant-based diet. But as it turns out, he's done pretty well. So don't be afraid to try new things, but do your research beforehand. Be very well prepared. That is going to give you the best possible outcome in your career. And as a ex-athlete, one of the worst things in having is regrets. And I'm quite lucky in not having any, or too many. But if doing these things and giving yourself the best chances is going to help you eradicate those regrets in later on in life, that you don't want to be asking yourself, what if? So put in the hard work now.
I like that. That ties in nicely with mental toughness. And there's a couple of elements there. One's learning orientation, which basically means just having the ability to take a step back and reflect on where you are and how you're going to get better. And when you think about that, then you've got to ask yourself some tough questions along the way, and certainly have a team around you to do that, to question your approach. And then the other one is around risk orientation. Some people just play things safe and they'll just keep doing the same old things time and time again. Other people are more likely to take a risk, like Novak obviously did, and it worked for him. You've certainly got to think outside of the box and try things.
Absolutely.
So, whereabouts can the listeners find out more about Kymira?
So, depending on which products they are looking for, which will be dictated obviously by their sport, KymiraSport.com caters for sort of the more general sports, and then Kymira Golf is a dedicated offering. So, www.kymiragolf.com specifically for our golfers. And of course, if they have any questions beyond that, then they're more than welcome to get in touch with us, and we can help them out.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time, Michael, Tim. It's been fascinating hearing more about Kymira, and a big thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Tim and Michael. It certainly hit home to me that the importance of rest and recovery and thinking outside of the box ultimately in order to improve your performance. So after listening to this episode, I'd really like you to consider the following questions. How effective is your recovery? How much of a priority are you giving rest and recovery? Do you have a recovery plan and a strategy up your sleeve? It's so important If you want to be operating at your best consistently, if you want to feel energized and focused and giving it 110%, 120% each and every day. So yeah, please go on, consider your sleep, nutrition, finding ways to get away from your sport or your work, ice baths. And what you might want to do actually is going back to a prior episode. It was episode 15 last year, which I created with Nick Grantham. Nick shares some fantastic ideas there and the basics around rest and recovery. Also, in relation to this show, you might want to take a look at the Kymira shop that we have on offer on our website. Personally, I've tested some of the garments and I have felt the benefits, so I feel confident in what I'm sharing. So go to the product section of our website, the 3ws.sport-excellence.co.uk, and you'll see what they've got to offer. You'll find fitness equipment, health supplements, equipment for injury prevention, things like massage guns, and products to aid your mental well-being, as well as golf-specific equipment, including gloves and training aids. Have a fantastic week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.